Welcome to the Virtual Career Lounge session, helping you to be a greater you. I'm your host, Dali Perez. This lounge is designed to help middle and high school students prepare for life after high school because failing to plan is planning to fail. And today we're going to talk about communication skills, and we're going to talk about the importance of strong communication skills, techniques for effective communication, and how to overcome common communications barriers. So before we start, we want to give a special thanks to this virtual career lounge session sponsor, EXL, a leading data analytics and digital operations and solutions company. If you want to learn more about EXL, go to exlservice.com. Thanks to their sponsorship, we're able to bring this lounge to you at no cost. So, a little bit about us: we are Love Our Youth. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization providing programs for youth. Our mission is to leverage the power of collaboration to uplift and empower youth and their families within our community. But before we kick off today's topic, we want to learn a little bit about more our panelists. So we would like to start off by asking each of you, our panelists, briefly introduce to yourself. So please share your name, tell us a little bit about yourself, what's your current role at your company, and why did you choose your current career?
Who's going to go first? John, you go first.
Hi, hi. My name is John Fedorko. I'm an attorney and a assistant vice president of product management at EXL. I spend time both doing some legal work and working on our solutions and getting them into the market.
Okay, I'll go next, I guess. Hi, my name is Nafi Falis. I'm actually the VP of Global Compliance here in the healthcare unit at EXL. I actually have been in this same role for close to 24 years. I picked this role and this career path because I actually wanted to be a lawyer. And so I became a paralegal instead. I had two kids already at the time, so law school wasn't an option. But I did pick up the paralegal role, so this transitioned into this compliance, legal, contract management type of role.
I'll go next.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Karen Bach. I am Assistant Vice President with Healthcare Compliance, and I've been working with this company probably for about 10 years or so, but it's through a couple different acquisitions. And I kind of fell into this type of work because when I was going through college, I started off wanting to get into physical therapy. But at the time, I was already almost 8 years into college because I was putting myself through school. So working full time and school part time. So I figured, well, I didn't really want to continue for a master's degree. So instead of the medical side of it, I decided to go into health administration. And from that business degree, it just kind of fell into working in compliance. So it's just kind of one of those things that just worked out the way it did. Here I am.
Hi, I'm Taryn Bevilacqua, and I'm a Senior Assistant VP, and I also work with Nafi and Karen. I've been working with Nafi for over 10 years now. Prior to being in compliance, I worked for internal audit, and then I kind of switched over to compliance. Compliance and audit does coincide a lot, so I had background for that. At the time, I was learning more about the healthcare background. So with that, now I've been in healthcare compliance for over 10 years. And on my team, we do multiple things. So we do things from incidents to contract reviews. So when I say incidents, it's things that are being reported, like a misdirected letter, if someone has a stolen laptop. We do training. We do a lot of different things. And then Karen also, she does all the audit piece. And then Nafi gets to oversee us.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for being here with us to talk about this so important topic, right? So, in each of your categories, in each of your work that you do, we need communication skills, right? We need to know how to talk to people and how to get the message through. So, we want to start this topic by asking specifically, why is it communication skill essential in both academic and professional settings?
I think I'll just jump right in if that's okay. I think that when you look at communication skills, that is communication is involved with absolutely everything we do. And in today's world, we're moving into an AI world and into a data world. And those are things that are hugely important, but we need to be able to maintain those communication skills to explain our products, to get our products in the hands of our clients, and to just continue to move the business forward. And I think that oftentimes the communication aspect gets lost with all of the technology we are dealing with today.
Yeah, I think it's the most important thing, not only in a professional setting, but in a personal setting. And so I think that if you're not able to correctly, I want to say not correctly, but properly and thoroughly communicate, then you're losing out on opportunities, both again in your personal life, right? You can't communicate with your spouse or you can't communicate with your kids. There's something to be lost there. Or, if you've got bad communication, it could be misinterpreted. And so there's so many different ways to communicate. But I think that being, thorough, open, and concise is key. Okay, you won't be understood, and you can't get your goals accomplished unless you can communicate what it is that you want, what it is that you need, etc. So it's a clear and very important skill.
I would agree with you, Nafi, and just to tag on to what you said, there's so many different ways to communicate. I think that's important as well, because a lot of times things can be misread, right? So if we're communicating via email or text, the receiver may not be receiving the message correctly. So I think it's important to also focus on the types of communication we use. And if you are communicating something via email or text, make sure you're clear. I know sometimes there's a lot of acronyms or people don't even understand when they receive them. So I think that's important as well.
Yeah, and to add on to both what everybody has said, I think a key component of the communication is not only the verbal communication, but also listening. Because a lot of times people, like, Taryn just mentioned, if you do text or email, you do acronyms, you're not really communicating, what you want other people to hear. So as a person on the other side of, interpreting either the text or the email, you're also having to interpret what that is. But if you're doing a verbal communication, the listening aspect is taking it to a different level, because with the verbal, you can also hear tones of somebody's, the way they speak, or if they're trying to communicate something but you're not really clear as to what they're saying. Both listening, and if you're able to be with them in person, you're able to get physical cues as well. So I think the whole communication is listening, speaking, understanding, etc. So it's very complex, and just having to pay attention to basically everything that's going on.
If I could just add briefly about that listening, I think that it's so important that you listen to understand and not just to respond. And I think we've all had those conversations with friends or coworkers, and you're talking, and you can just see that individual just waiting to respond back to you without necessarily digesting what you are saying. So again, listen to understand, not just to offer a response ultimately.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I love that because sometimes people are not listening to the need, but just listening to how to respond and how to defend themselves, and they don't resolve nothing, right? So that leads me to the next question, to those different type of styles of communication. You guys talked about personal, live, email, verbal, listening, and all that. So can we dive a little bit into that, like giving some examples? Or what are the different styles, like the verbal? How can we communicate better? How can we listen better? Can we dive a little bit into that, those different styles of communication skills?
I think with when communicating and verbally, I think tone is very important as well, right? So I would say, as an example, both professionally, in a professional environment, let's say you're communicating with your team members, you don't want to come off as not clear, not organized. So you want to kind of gather your thoughts. Again, maybe listen to yourself first before you communicate. And then that way you're communicating what you want done clearly. And then I also think in your personal life as well, right? I'm also a mother, so I know, and I'm sure whoever's a parent can relate. Sometimes your kids get you fired up and you yell at them, right? But it's not always effective. And I think the same goes for at work too. So you don't want to come off with, oh, I'm aggravated or frustrated, because that other person is not going to receive that well.
I
So
think
I
that
think, go ahead, John.
I think it's very important to what I'll call be present when you're communicating with someone, and this is especially true in person or in a virtual setting. In video, with all of the distractions we have today with our phones and all of the social media, and you've been at a table with people and everyone's on their phone, and really nobody's engaged in the communication. So I think it's very, very important to be present throughout all conversations and communication.
So I was going to mention the one, I don't think we've talked about this, but the nonverbal messaging, right? And nonverbal communication. So I've got this face that is just out there, right? And I caught, so when I'm literally in meetings, I have some of my colleagues will ping me and say, put your filter on, right? Because I'm like,
The
I'm going
subtitles,
crazy.
the subtitles. I call it the subtitles.
Exactly. So you can't forget that, right? That's super important, because you could be saying something, but your face could be saying something completely different. And so you have to align those two and make sure that, one, that you're sending the right message to what you want to be saying, but also to make sure that you're not sending, incorrectly projecting a viewpoint. That's what I like to do a lot of. But so I always try to keep that. I really have to concentrate to say, okay, I need to send this message and be professional about it, and not do the facial thing. But and I think we can also break down communication as, you've got aggressive, right? You've got passive aggressive. You've got these different styles of and we've all dealt with leaders that, for example, the passive aggressive type, right? And that's the least of my favorite, because you just tell me how you feel, put it out there clearly, tell me what you want me to do, and we're good. But not everybody communicates that way. And so learning how different people communicate, I think, is also key to your success within your organization, your professional relationships, because you have to, I think, we need to learn to respond to that type of communication, depending on which boss I'm talking to today, right? So that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah,
And
amazing.
I think another, sorry to interject, but I think another thing that just struck me with that is, as you're communicating, and I think to also a point that Taryn made or commented on, as far as, think about what you're going to say before you say it. I know there's often times where sometimes, like especially with myself, because sometimes my brain and my mind just, goes further into the future than where I am now. So I'm already like 3 steps ahead, but I have to, have in my mindset, okay, focus on what we're talking about now. But I'm also, and Nathan can attest to this, because like, don't solve the problem now. So it's just keeping your communication aspects to, like what was said earlier, be in the present. But I think another aspect, and you may get to this with one of your questions, but I think another aspect with the communication is, with your listening, it could also be an aspect of, okay, if you want to get into the area of debate, for example. So you're listening to somebody present, whatever they're discussing about, but in your mind, it's like, okay, I kind of, agree with that, but to further that conversation, it's like, well, what about this? bring in other possibilities to keep that conversation going, and then open the conversation to other ways of thinking, which some people may just have like a single mindset. And it's like, well, I'm only this is how I see it. But if you have an open communication, that may bring in, additional thoughts that you may not have thought of.
Yeah, that's amazing. And a lot of the things that we do, not only with communicating with people, even though in social media, don't close the conversation, right? Don't make a statement, but make questions to know a little bit more, to understand a little bit more. And what can you guys tell me about in when we're talking about communication and trying to project to the team, or getting that message through? What will be the difference when someone speaks in we as a team, or you and me in single person? I don't know if I make clear the question, but there's a different styles in communication when, if you want to communicate something to a team, for example, and then you go and ask, okay, we're a team, we're going to do this together, how can we improve? Or being bossy, or being that passive aggressive, what would you say was the difference between those styles, and what would be the effectiveness if we use the proper communication?
Well, I think
I,
it's it's a huge difference when you walk in as it's me versus hey we're like, and so you've got two people from my team here today, and I think that they'll say that I always try to be like, hey, this is us, right? Same with communicating successes and acknowledging their involvement, because that's the other thing is the communicator that won't share in the spotlight, right? It's so I think coming in and saying we're all in this together, we're a team, we're here to support. You're going to build trust, confidence, and greater outcomes for sure.
I've always been a big fan of using the we, and that's something that actually I learned in law school for the first time. And for an example, if I'm working on a particular case or something, and I have to take it to our client, I will always say, I'll take this proposal back to our client. I never say I'll take it back to my client. It's not my client. It's either the law firm's client or EXL's client. And I think that, I mean, there are certainly situations where I is appropriate, but in the vast majority of communication in the professional setting, I think that the we really works a lot better.
Yeah. The we is very much, I think everybody accepts that. Whereas the I, it's like, well, and to your point, John, with clients, even if I'm answering things as a team, right, within my organization, I'm not going to say, okay, here's my responses. I usually say, here are our responses. I'm always making sure that I'm careful to say that, because I do think people perceive that differently. I think there's a big difference. And I think personally as well, because I've been caught doing that, being like, well, my, and is it, and they're like, well, is it my or is it ours, right? Like if you're a couple or you have a partner.
Yeah, I think in the
Absolutely.
end it's building a huge amount of trust, you
Right.
know,
Mhm.
because I
Yeah.
know you're in this with me and you're in this mess with me.
Right,
Yeah.
and we're together towards a goal. That's absolutely right. And the one of the things that one of you mentioned was the emails, right? The writing. How do we write? And usually in texting and all that, not everybody is going to translate that to what is the intention that you want to get through that email or that text. And I give you a simple example. My son had homework that in the system it was graded F, like he didn't turn it in, but he did turn it in. So I told him, write an email to the teacher and ask her, and said, like, you turn it in, if she can double check and all that. So I always like to see what he's gonna send. So when I went to see what he sent, he started the sentence saying, how come you don't have? And I'm like, what are you doing? You cannot write that. Okay, let me help you to write it in a better way so you can get the message out there. So what's the importance, right, of communication skills when we are writing a message, a text, or an email?
I think there's a lot that goes into that. One is make sure you know the message that you're trying to convey. I think that's very important. And keep in mind that, this is a message maybe you've dealt with for a while or you've been thinking about, but the recipient this is probably maybe something brand new to them. So you need to don't start in the middle of the story. Make sure you know what you're trying to convey. And I when I work with my team a lot, I talk about being clear and concise. I mean, I think those are the two most important things. And one other thing that I believe, and I think a lot of people overlook this, is what I'll call the visual aspect of your communication. If you're writing a lengthy email, break it up into paragraphs. It is very difficult, or a lengthy letter. It's very difficult as a reader or the recipient of that email or letter to look at one big, long, single spaced paragraph. So I think that it's important to understand and acknowledge the visual aspect of written communication as well as the content of that communication.
Mm-hmm. And I think to that point with the describing or adding detail to it, it's also a fine line, because depending on how many people you're commuting this email to, you may have some people who are aware of what you're trying to communicate, but then you may have somebody who's, like John said, who doesn't really know or who hasn't been part of the conversation before. So it's almost like a fine line as far as like how much detail is too much detail and not enough detail. So just, providing enough information to cover all of that, may be a little lengthy, but, maybe enough to give the person who doesn't know what you're talking about or trying to, get them to be on board with what you're trying to convey. And another thing that I also try to like to do also is, in addition to if it's a longer email, break it down into bullet points, highlight, if there's something important you want to get across, make it a bullet point or bold it, but don't go overboard with, all these different colors and, things that may just take your eye away from, oh my God, what are you trying to say? So, simplicity, but enough detail to say, this is what we're trying to talk about. This is what we're trying to convey.
Yeah, and I think that this is probably the same thing, but it's like provide, and I think the word that comes to mind is perspective, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times it's happened to us here, like, get a leadership change or what have you, and I'll just be like, yeah, go ahead and sign this, just get it done, or, get this done for me or what. And I fail to give that person perspective. This is what this is for. This is why I'm asking. Or, hey, by the way, so 3 people have already approved this. You don't have to, worry about it, or whatever the issue is, right? They don't know. They get this email, and I do this to my kids all the time. I'll send a text that says, pick up the dog. And they'll be like, which dog, where, what happened to the dog, and I'm like, oh, I thought you knew all that, right? Weren't you reading my mind? Yeah. And so they'll be like, Mom, you're like the worst texter, but that's a great, is the dog okay? And I'm like, oh yeah, it's just at the groomers, So
I think too, I'm also guilty of that. I have gotten, I think, a little better. Sometimes I step back, and one thing I've noticed, and I don't know if you've seen this, Nafi, I've done it to you, where if you're out for like a week, instead of me just forwarding an email now to you, I'll put something in it that says, you don't need to address until you come back, and this is what it is, just so you know. Because before I was just shooting things off, and when someone's not in the office for an extended amount of time, they come back, they're bombarded with emails, and then they're like, what is this for, right? So you just have to think about and be cautious of who's your audience and what are you trying to communicate. And then one last thing I did want to add, because I've seen this a lot, is people do not use spell check, and it is so easy to use. So just spell check your emails, because then you also, especially if you're sending an email to a client and you have spelling errors, you're coming across as uneducated, you just don't want to do that.
And you also need to be polite, right? So towards the end of like your son's email, he could, I'm hoping that he said, thank you for your consideration, or thank you for digging through, your emails for my homework or whatever. Like at the end, I always try to be polite, be grateful or thankful, or, acknowledge and summarize and acknowledge what you're asking them to do, or otherwise, right? I always like to
Absolutely.
much nicer email.
Yeah, and I think in other aspects, I mean, this goes to, I think, both verbal communication as well as written, with emails. Like with our company, we're a global company. So we interact with, different countries, different cultures. So just, having the understanding of, how our culture is here versus, say the culture in India or culture in Philippines or, Colombia, Russia, wherever. So the writing skills may be, slightly different. So it's just changing, I don't want to say the expectation, but just changing how like I would see somebody else's writing. It's like I may not be, as used to it or as familiar with it because I may not have interacted as much with some of those other countries or customs. But it's just then taking a step back saying, okay, I think we're saying the same thing, but just trying to keep in mind that it may be a cultural thing with how certain things are written. So I think that's another thing to take into account also.
I'll give you a very, very quick example of that. And early on, and she mentioned we deal with our colleagues in India a lot. And one of the phrases that is often used is at the end of an email, they send me a document to review, and then it ends with "please do the needful." And the first few times I saw that, I kind of thought it was insulting. But I realized that's just, please follow up, please, please take care of this. And I learned that it's just a cultural difference and a different way of communicating. And, so I'm no longer offended by it, but I was, and I kind of laugh at myself because of it. But the first few times I saw it.
Yeah.
Gentle reminder. That's my favorite. Gentle reminder to give me what I asked for 2 weeks ago.
Absolutely. And having that you mentioned, all that, having that emotional intelligence, right? And that kindness, that empathy that you are mentioning. So how important is that, having that emotional intelligence, understanding like not everybody speaks the same way, and I should be aware of who am I talking to. One of you mentioned that. So is it important to have that emotional intelligence? And if you don't have it, maybe taking a class or maybe adding something to you, to make you, have that communication. How important is to understand that?
Well,
I
I
think
mean, I
it's
think that
hugely
if you
important
don't
as
have
we all
it,
agree.
yeah, go ahead. No, if you don't have it,
Go
your life
ahead,
is
Nathan.
much more difficult. But and I don't know that that's really something that you said take a class, and I was gonna say, right. So I think that the message that I want to send is that absolutely take every opportunity that you can. There's various ways to learn communication skills. There's various things, like I said, you've got nonverbal, you've got verbal, you've got writing. So I would highly recommend taking as many courses or classes or online tutorials that you can find. But I think that if you don't have that, because it will make it will make your life a lot harder and maybe even unsuccessful, right? Because if you don't have that ability, and we had to learn it because we had never worked globally, and so as we started, working in these other areas, we all had to learn that, or it's just like the email doesn't sound right because it's in a different tone or what have you. But so I think it's really important. I think it could really hurt your ability to succeed in a company, for example, like ours, right? And nowadays there's a lot more globalness than there used to be. So 9 times out of 10, you're going to end up talking to somebody, someplace else.
And I would echo what Nafi said, and Nafi and Taryn, all of us here on the call. We've been through various acquisitions and become more global, and it's not always been easy. And there have certainly been some difficult people to communicate with. We've been myself. I'll take blame. I've been difficult at times to communicate with, but as you learn and grow, I see Nafi smiling. Come on, Nafi. But as you learn and grow with your colleagues and learn to understand and become more perceptive and become a better listener, it's practice. There's a lot of it is just practice.
Yeah, and just
Absolutely.
we have a saying here that that I haven't heard for a little while now, but it's something that was put out by one of our previous leaders, and it's assume positive intent, right? And I have to tell myself that quite a bit because I'll read something and I'll be like, "What does this person think they're doing, or what are they saying?" And then I'm like, "Okay, assume positive intent. If they were coming from a good place, how would you respond to that, right?" And so I think that assuming positive intent in the communication process is also would be helpful.
I
Absolutely.
just
And in
and I
terms of
wanted
Go
getting
ahead.
better at it, I'll come away from conversations or meetings or calls, and it, like, wasn't my best day. And you will have those
Mhm,
days, and people that
mhm,
as
yeah.
they grow and evolve, they'll have those times where they'll step back and say, "No, I don't think I did very well communicating today." You learn from it.
Yeah, and in those bad days, right? Because everybody has a bad day, and sometimes we wake up saying it's my way or the highway, and then those days are not so good. But how important you think it is, like when you're having a bad day, that you woke up like that, how important it is to go back and say to the team, you know what? I'm sorry. I shouldn't
Mhm.
talk to you that way. Let's, do
Mhm,
this again. How important it is to recognize in front of your colleagues or your team that you didn't have a good day.
Mhm. I do it all the time.
And either that,
yeah,
or if you were not clear
yeah,
for some reason or other.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
I
I think,
know.
Nathan even made the comment, before, as far as, trusting yourself, trusting your team. And I think that's just all part of it. I mean, if you trust the team that you work with and the people, it's like, I have no qualms as far as like, okay, I'm having a really bad day. Just put up with me, or I'm not going to talk to you or communicate with you because it's not worth it for me, for you. But to go back and say, yeah, it was a bad day, and if we have to have the conversation again, we can. But I think if you work with your team long enough and you communicate with the different people, they tend to know, your good days, your bad days. Are you slightly off today, or if you're like super hyper because you're excited about something? So I think just having that trust, with yourself and the people that you work with and interact with is a
I
good
think
thing.
it's also
I
important
think
to
if no,
it's
go ahead,
important
John.
to keep in mind that when we're talking about our teams and the people we work with together all the time, as Karen said, we do learn each other's way of communicating and how to deal with that. I think it's important to remember there are always going to be situations, whether it's with colleagues or external personnel, that you're going to have a difficult time communicating with some people. Um, and that's okay. It's going to happen. Maybe it's because the other person is antagonistic. Maybe that other person tried to bully you, and it was a difficult conversation for you. But there are people that it's a challenge. You're just not going to connect with. So in those situations, the best thing you can do is be respectful, listen, don't become argumentative, and just try to come to some middle ground in that conversation, realizing and acknowledging that it was a tough conversation and they're not all going to be that way.
Yeah, and I think it promotes, I think, right? It promotes respect amongst your colleagues. If I go to the and I joke you not, I joke not. I literally tell my team this all the time. The other day I said something and I cut Karen off for something she was saying, and I was like, I'm sorry. Like, I am having a bad day. I'm having a moment. Like, please forgive me. Like, let's move on or whatever. Because if I don't do that, then how are they going to, if I'm not transparent about it, then how are they going to know that then they're not going to respect me back, right? It's not going to be a mutual respect if I don't stop and say, ooh, sorry, that was a tough one, or I haven't had my coffee. I say that one a lot too. Like, don't talk to me. I haven't had my coffee. So I think that recognizing your faults or your small failures or whatever, missteps. I think
Patience.
it's a big deal, big
Yeah.
deal, because nobody's
And I
perfect.
think that folks in leadership roles, it's very important that you do that and that you're setting the tone. And again, we've all been here for a while. We've had some former leadership that it was they maybe I think set a different tone. But when your leaders are very respectful and clear in their communication, I think it really makes a difference how a team, a company, a group of people playing a sport, how they become more cohesive.
I think
100%.
I think too, definitely owning it, right? And it happens to everybody. It's going to happen at some point to everybody. You're going to have to apologize or own that you had a bad day. But also, you don't want to be that person that's having a bad day all the time because you don't want your team members to then become the same way, right? So I know for myself with my team, sometimes like I'll be like, oh, I'll read the email and I'm frustrated, but I'm like, all right, let me just take a minute. Let me just call them and see what's happening here, right? So maybe take a step back before you respond and just kind of woosah, I guess, for a minute is a good thing too. Because you don't want them to become the same way and think, okay, then we can do this all the time. I can have a bad day every day. So
Yeah, and I would like to add, like, if you have a difficult situation with anybody in any scenario, don't resolve it via email. Like, don't keep escalating. We had a leader that was just, it was like first, then you'd be sleeping and it was pinging because he wasn't done yet, and it was like, more and more and more, and I was like, oh my lord, just stop, right? So I always tell again my team, I'm like, just like Taryn just said, just call that person. You probably will resolve this a lot quicker than if you back and forth via email, especially if it's a tough conversation. But and everybody knows what leader I was talking about.
Absolutely. And having that trust, right? So if you're used to that to communicate with your team or your colleagues, they will have that confidence to go back to you as well in any difficult situation or at a conflict. If that's what you want, a team and a colleague and people that can communicate with you and it is a mutual communication route. So that's amazing. Thank you for that. And another thing that you guys mentioned, it was the public speaking. And I want to dive a little bit into that because I think it's important that everybody has that skill. It not necessarily be talking about in front of 10,000 people, but having that skill that you can stand up and you can speak and you can communicate with people. So how important it is and what can the teens and students do to improve or to learn that skill to speaking in front of people?
Practice in front of a mirror
they
and
do
just,
say that.
yeah, you write a speech, a little speech, whatever it may be, and start practicing in front of the mirror. And I would start small. If you're in a meeting or you go, you know, raise, always like be inclusive, right? Ask questions. Ask questions. That'll, if there's a big group, it'll give you that, start giving you that little bit of confidence, right? But you got to practice your confidence, and I would highly recommend practicing in front of a mirror.
I think
Agreed.
public speaking is one of those things that, some people are just outstanding. We've all seen, you've been just so engaged in somebody's speech. And other folks, it's very, very difficult for them to get up in front of a group. I think the majority of us fall somewhere on that spectrum. But I think practice is most important in being confident in your topic. If you're giving a presentation, you want to make sure you know the subject matter and that you're confident with it, because that will come across in your presentation. And as Nafi said, be engaging. Look at your audience. Take your time and explain. Don't talk too fast. All of those little skills, they're very important.
I think too is taking every opportunity that's given to you. So if you're invited, like this, for example, if you're invited to join a panel or a webinar, then you should join. And even if it's baby steps and you're only contributing a little, I'll share a personal experience. So years ago, Nafi was asked, I think, to present at a conference live, and she couldn't. She had a conflict. So she told me, well, you're going. And I was like, and now this is in front of like hundreds of people. So I'm like, oh, okay. So I'm like, I need to know what I'm doing. And it was with one of our vendors. But honestly, it was like an amazing experience. And now since then, I've done more. So it's like you're growing.
See, I had trust in you and confidence in your abilities.
And I think to a point, John made as far as like, read your audience or know your audience,
Oh, yeah.
because you may be, you may know your subject, you're maybe an expert on it, but depending on how often you may, have an opportunity to do a presentation or speak in front of, 10 people, 200 people, whatever the number, the audience changes all the time. So it's just, having the confidence in yourself and then understanding, okay, all these people are different. Some may know what I'm talking about, others may not know what I'm talking about, but it's just, again, having that confidence in reading the audience. It's like, we're going to have opportunities to do that. And we know that sometimes you're going to have people who are like, oh, they're on their phones or they're falling asleep. So it's just knowing that it could be different every single time, but just, practice, like Taryn said, just take any opportunity. If it's a small, large, even with your group of friends, if you want to, it's like, hey, I have this opportunity to present my paper on, whatever the topic. Can I practice with you? Can you be my audience? Can you pretend that you're interested in what I'm saying and, just give me feedback, et cetera. So use your friends, use other coworkers, like, just practice with them as well, because if they could give you as much feedback as you want and, take it and, improve yourself that way also.
Yeah, and how important, now that you mentioned the feedback, how important it is that we learn how to receive the feedback, because not everybody likes to receive feedback. And to be honest, not every feedback is with good intentions.
Mm-hmm.
But either or, how important is to receive the feedback. Whatever is good, we take it. Whatever is not good, we just leave it be. But how important is to just listen to that person that is telling you, okay, do this, do that, improve this.
I think you have to, what you said, right? There's going to be good feedback, and maybe sometimes you don't have to look at it as negative feedback, right? We
Mm-hmm.
call it constructive criticism.
Mm-hmm.
And I even do that with my team. I say, look, I usually start by telling them what a great job they're doing and point out the things that they are doing great. So I
Mm-hmm.
say, don't take this personally. This is constructive criticism where you can improve. And that way they're more receptive to it, right? Whereas if you come in and you're like, you did this all wrong, fix it. That's, they're not going to take that well.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's
But
important to be able
sorry,
to
Karen.
handle both.
But I think it's really important because you want to know
Mm-hmm.
what other people are thinking of you,
Yeah.
right? So you want to know how you're being perceived. So it's to me, it's very important that you listen, process. It's okay, right? You don't have to react, but it's the ability to accept it. I believe is very key to your growth and your success. Because if you don't know how people are perceiving you, then you can't course correct or even improve. Because if I think everybody likes me or I think I did everything right, I'm not going to want to improve or make any changes.
Mhm.
So I think they need to listen very carefully.
And it's sort of tied into the feedback is, and this is particularly helpful in like one-on-one conversations or small group conversations. You can disagree with people. You can do it, I think you can do it diplomatically. By saying you listen to that person's perspective, listen to their explanation, and respond with, I appreciate your perspective. I understand where you're coming from. However, but based on my experience, I view it this way. And I think it's important to be able to have that give and take in communication with your colleagues, with your friends, with your family.
Yeah, and I think to that point, it's like you can't go on the assumption that each person is like, I'm right, you're wrong. And that's not the case. It's like you have your opinion, I may see it differently. And even with the constructive criticism or negative, it's like just have that as an opportunity to open a dialogue. It's like, oh, okay, I didn't see that I presented myself that way, or I don't recall saying that. Just again, listening to what they're saying, interpret what they're saying, and say, okay, I understand, or I don't understand. Can you explain it further? So again, that just goes to this whole communication aspect. So it could just lead into, it's like that may also change that person's viewpoint. It's like, oh, I thought I was, seeing it or hearing you say this, but now that we explained it a little differently, they may say, "Oh, I get it. You did a great job." So it's just communication, like this whole
I'll give
topic.
you an example of a recommendation someone made to me relative to communication skills, nonverbal communication skills. We were talking. This was several years ago when I was a young attorney. We were talking to we were in a conference room type setting with a client. It was kind of a roundtable discussion. And I was very, very intentionally kind of leaning back in my chair, and because I thought it presented and promoted the casual atmosphere that we were trying to foster. My colleague pointed out that it was standoffish, and that he was sitting up at the table, he was engaged, and that's something I specifically remember, because even though my intention was not to be that way, it came across that way.
So when you were mean to me, you just meant to be mean to me years ago.
Oh, absolutely. Always. Anytime I will ever mean to you, Nate, it was intentional.
Let's see feedback. Feedback.
Now I know. Now I know what were the intentions. Yeah, and I would like to add to that, having those people around you that will really give you objective feedback, and not just having people that loves you and that would say you did everything great even though you didn't. So having those people that that they're going to tell you, listen, you got to do this, you got to do that, and improve in this area. So I think that's super important as well. We have had an amazing conversation today, but before we jump into hot seat questions, if you guys want to say one last tip on to the students, to the teens, so how can they improve their communication skills?
I guess my only thought and advice is, again, take every class you can find, every opportunity to test yourself, to challenge yourself. Don't step away from that, or don't fear that, and just shoot for the stars. You can do it.
Mm-hmm.
We all can.
And my final thought would be, and I've said it before, and this is one of the things I always harp on, is be clear and concise. And the next statement I want to make is a bit of a cliche, but I think it's important. Say what you mean and mean what you say.
And I would say, just again, stop, just take a second, think about what you want to communicate before you do it, because you don't want to put your foot in your mouth.
Yeah, and I think what everybody else has already said, but it's, again, just trust yourself. Even if you're hesitant or you're uncertain or you're totally nervous, just try it and see what happens. It's like just getting out there, putting yourself out there, and take the criticism, take the positive criticism. Just take it, absorb it, and learn from it and grow from it. Because it is a learning experience. It is something that we all overcome at one point in our life or another. But it's just being comfortable with yourself. Just making sure that however you want to interpret or communicate to somebody, just if you can, read the room. It's like, or do they even want to hear me talk? So it's just confidence in yourself.
Absolutely. This has been amazing. And now we want to take a little bit of time to ask each of you a few questions and put you in the hot seat. So the first question will be, if you could have dinner with any historical figure, who would it be and why?
Oh my goodness.
I am horrible at history.
I know.
It's horrible. I'm like, I have no idea. I guess, I don't know, Bill Clinton.
I think I was gonna say Barack Obama, just because, or even Michelle, because they're such eloquent speakers. Sometimes I just like to just listen to them because they just have their wisdom and their poise. It's just amazing to me.
I'll go in a totally different direction. This is something I haven't really ever thought of, but I'm intrigued by personalities, and Johnny Cash. He was a very complex, and unique individual who had a lot of challenges, a lot of
Mhm.
successes, and a lot of opinions, and he was good about explaining them. And I think he would be a fascinating person to sit down and talk to.
So, John, how many concerts have you been to, and who's that person that you follow?
Bruce Springsteen, yes.
Bruce Springsteen.
I do
Oh,
follow.
how
I do
many?
follow Bruce. Yes, I've been to over 100 of his concerts. Thank you.
Wow.
Fun fact.
Wow.
Uh-huh.
But I didn't choose him as my one person.
No, I know. I see that. All good. Taryn, you? Anybody for you?
Oh, no, I think I'd mirror what Karen said. I'd pick Michelle because I love her and I just think she's so well spoken and just the person that she is, everything that she does. I feel like she's so involved, always trying to help.
Hmm. Improve other people's lives.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. So the next question will be, what's your favorite way to spend a rainy day?
That one's easy for
That's
me.
easy.
I can tell
Especially if
you
it's
how I have to spend it versus how I want to spend it. I'd want to spend it by myself, maybe watching movies and doing nothing, because I don't remember, honestly, the last time I did that. Just because life is so busy, right? So you have to take a minute for yourself.
Absolutely.
for me, it's having the sliding glass doors to my deck open, especially if it's cool, and listening to the rain and reading a book. That's the perfect day
Yep.
for me.
Yep.
On the couch with a blanket. Yep. Just listening to with the windows open. I don't have a deck, but just having the windows open and just
Yeah.
listening to it, and just it's decompressing. You know, the rain is calming and soothing, and just relax.
I agree.
Awesome. So the next one, it will be, if you could instantly become an expert in one thing, what would it be?
Generative AI.
Good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's me. Or cooking.
Then you know it all.
I know.
Yeah. Or cooking, maybe.
Right.
Yeah, that's a hard one.
That's awesome.
I don't think I
Anybody
have one.
else? Do you want to have something that you want to be expert on? Maybe, I don't know, be a pilot, flying a plane.
There's a lot of things I want to do. That's the problem. So trying to narrow it down to just one. But mine's not cooking.
I think it'd be
love
awesome.
cooking.
I think it would be awesome to either be an author or a songwriter.
That would be nice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Getting
I do
that.
a lot of reading, but I don't have the inclination to write. So I think that would be something to, be an expert on. So,
Nice.
what about yourself? Can we ask you?
Hmm.
Hmm.
Let's see. I don't know. I haven't thought about that.
It's a tough one, isn't it?
I'll
It is
say
Yes.
maybe more in the tech world, to know that back end of stuff, the IT stuff that sometimes we get stuck on it.
Mhm.
When
How
it
it
comes
works.
to computers and stuff, yeah, that
Mhm.
would be some skill that I would love to
Mhm.
have. I mean,
Mhm.
it takes me time. I know my way through and I know things, but there's some times that I am like, help, I'm stuck. So I think that would be something that I would love to have right now. That tech skill behind the scenes stuff. Yep. That will be very, very, very helpful.
Mhm.
Especially these days with the AI intelligence and all that.
And then you can contact Nafi because she's going to be the expert on AI.
Be the generative AI expert.
Yeah.
That's true.
It's the new buzz, right? The new buzz.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. So for the final question, was one thing that you're really, really, really passionate about it, and why?
Oh.
I guess for me, it's my family. That's the one. Like I just I want them all to be happy, all to be safe, and that's my thing.
I would say
I
I'm
was
very
gonna
passionate about both
go.
reading and music. And I think that for a couple different reasons, reading can transport you to any place in the world and to any time in the world. And music, I'm passionate about because it can help you to feel and to express yourself.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, and I tend to agree with everything that was just said, but I think also for me is pets, animals, because they're the unconditional love that you don't expect anything from them. You come home and they're just there with their little smile. You think it's a smile, but they're just there to greet you. And it's like, you're home, you're home. So it's just the pets because they bring the unconditional love. They don't judge, and they're very supportive of anybody, really. So,
That's amazing. So you're a pet lover.
yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So thank you so much, you guys, for being here with me today. Has been a pleasure to have you here and talked about this so important skill, which is communication. So thank you so much for joining us today. We hope today's conversation has given you insight and clarity on making plans for life after high school. And special thanks to the Virtual Career Lounge session sponsor, EXL, a leading data analytics and digital operations and solutions company. Learn more about EXL at exlservice.com. Thanks to their sponsorship, we are able to bring you this lounge to you at no cost. We look forward to seeing you at the next virtual career lounge sessions. And remember that all the sessions, you're going to find them here on YouTube. So make sure you subscribe, you like, you comment, you share with your friends so they can be in tune and learn these amazing skills. So thank you for joining us. See you next time.